nobody can deny you have friction versus flow in life, right? And
Yeah.
I would argue that nearly all of us, for most of our life, if not all of our life, some of us, we're always pushing against the current and we can't just go with the flow. And a lot of that, heck, I would say all of it is tied to.
Welcome back to Agency Masters. I'm Robb Bailey, and this podcast is where I share the strategies, systems, and insights I've gained from selling my own agency and helping over 20,000 digital agencies grow and do the same. My hope is that the content here is valuable to you along your journey and that you share, review, and enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Robb Bailey. I am your fearless leader, your host here on this podcast. And I've got a very special guest today. His name is Sal Stefano, or you might see him online as Salvatore Stefano, Italian to the bone. I can't believe you're not even on this beautiful 4th of July, not wearing a gold houndstooth around your neck. But here we are. Sal, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Really. Thank you for taking time, especially on July 4th as a holiday, for coming on and dropping some bombs with us. So appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. No puns intended there, huh?
Yeah. So, I didn't even realize I was doing that, but yeah. Okay. So I'll try to be more aware of my puns.
Be more PC. Be more PC.
That's right. Yeah. America, F yeah. So I'm wearing, for those of you that can't see, I'm wearing my one and only America shirt with the stars, and it's red. And I've got a hat on that's got some white and a little bit of blue in it. That's about as fancy as I get. My nephew in Texas has socks, glasses, hats, shirts, all the accessories on 4th of July. He just goes absolutely bonkers. So this is me trying to set my game up just a tad. Although I am patriotic, I'm not that guy who is in his American flag Speedos at the lake or anything like that. I'm a little more subdued. I don't know why. It's just, but nevertheless,
nobody wants those images, that visuals, bro. Nobody wants to see you at the beach in your Speedo. Come on,
that's
Rob.
right. I'm too hairy. I am too hairy to pull anything like that off anyway. So that completes the visual, right? Okay. Well, if you were bored before, you're not now for the listeners and viewers here. So get ready for more of that, because Sal is a super funny guy. He's been through it all in business and personal life. And he's recently started a podcast of his own, which we can talk about here in a minute. But I think it's really cool that you have decided to become super transparent about a lot of this stuff. And I see you posting really cool things online about your personal life and your business. And, I'm one of those people that think that 2 and 2 are mostly just hand in hand. There's no line in between anymore, especially for what we do, right? And so I was hoping that you could just share maybe some of the lessons that you've learned over the past years. Tell us a little bit about the ride. You've had plenty of ups and downs, I know. And then, maybe you can share it with some folks, some key takeaways or things that have vastly improved your business as you've learned sort of what works for you and what doesn't. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A few years ago, I gave Rob $5,000 and the rest is history. I was a bum before that, and look at me now.
That's
just
right.
Totally kidding. Well, not totally. But rewinding, back here a little bit. So you can watch some other stuff online about this story, but just very short version. When I was a kid, my dad broke his neck in a bad car accident, took care of my family for 10 years. That's what caused me to get into entrepreneurship, because nobody else could give me a job, or nobody else would give me the jobs that I wanted, and the jobs that I would get, I couldn't stand the people I worked with and had to be my own boss, because I would just quit and move on to another job. And so while I always worked and had, other jobs lined up, like 99.99% of my life, which is why I never became homeless. Thankfully, there's times I lived in a car for maybe a few days or a week at a time, but nothing crazy, and that's because, I would just, even though I would, switch jobs like every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes a month, 3 months, 6 months. Like the longest job I had, I think was, I ran a business for about 3 years. That was the longest I ever had a job, period, including my own jobs that I've made. And so, when you grow up, like a lot of us, maybe not grow up, but when you have the mind of like us, a lot of us entrepreneurs, regardless of the circumstances why we started the business, somewhere along the way, you realize that the path that society has for most of the population, I'd probably say about 95 to 97% of the population are kind of what I would say, for lack of a better term, normal, or average is probably a better way to put it. And that's not a bad thing at all. There's a lot of times growing up where I wish like I had an average normal life that didn't have these crazy ups and downs and pits and valleys everywhere. And that's basically why I got into the podcast that I'm doing now, because I wanted to get away from just solely worried about making money all the time. Because, kind of like been there past that obstacle. Like, you get it, dude. Once you learn how to make money and just make it kind of appear out of nowhere, especially working on the internet, right? It's not the money that really motivates you anymore, because you can always just go out and make more money. And when you know that you can just go out and make more money, well, your risk tolerance all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, mine was always high, but it's not that the risk tolerance goes up necessarily. It's your confidence goes up and the stress goes down. Versus before, when you first start, you might have the risk tolerance still, but that doesn't mean you're not shitting your pants the whole way through that roller coaster ride,
Right. Oh yeah.
And so for me, it's taken me a very long time to truly understand balance in life, because I was essentially, forced at a young age to just grow up really quickly, miss out on my childhood. And because of that, I never really got to smell the roses, if you will, both literally and proverbially, because, come to find out, like, and once again, because I couldn't stop and smell the roses, I just now found out literally like 2 weeks ago. And this is after I've done everything to clean up my life and get super healthy and lose all this weight. And, like I did everything to, heal myself and become whole that I could possibly think of. And I was still getting these bad headaches, and having this brain fog. Turns out, well, my whole not being able to smell most of my life that I would joke around about was because I had really bad allergies, like severely bad, and I had a deviated septum. And those two combinations, oh my gosh, no wonder why my life sucked so bad. And I always felt like crap every single day. And it's like, if I just slow down early on in my life, it wouldn't have taken me nearly 15 years in order to, number one, just learn everything I did in entrepreneurism in general. The first 10 years were absolutely horrible. I gave up a few times. I started probably 10 plus different businesses that they all made money because I had to make money, but it wasn't a business. It was a job.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You were like self-employed. It wasn't a real business, right?
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would try to like outsource work and hire people, but it really didn't work out because there was a lot of problems in myself that I need to fix. And there's a lot of education I didn't have, but where I didn't have education, I had the hustle and I had the drive. And unfortunately, I had the morals too of a church nun, which meant that, because growing up, like, my dad, let's just say he was involved in a lot of different things. And, I was born in Vegas. He's from New York. I'll let you guys connect the dots, get into maybe that at another point. But, when I was 20 years old and I got into business, out of other street businesses, I was like, I'm going to do everything right. I'm not going to have the stress. I want to be able to, sleep at night. Right. And so I kind of like really took, what you call the high road. Doesn't mean I didn't make a bunch of mistakes. It mean like there was in times where I had clients who maybe didn't get as much success as I would have liked them to see. And so the point I'm trying to make there is, went through all these different businesses. And it took me about 10 years until I really built my first 7-figure business. And even then, just to get there, I ended up giving up. I started off at 85% of that business. and I gave up. Let's see, I was down to 20% of what I owned from my business partners who they didn't quit their jobs to work in this business. I did, which I had my second 6-figure paying job that I ever had in sales. You know, I was working for web.com doing consulting, you know, doing great there. Right. And before that was like a small agency that I helped blow it from 10,000 to like 100K, you know, a month of revenue, which kind of like led me on the path like, hey, like, okay, I'm kind of ready to start my own business.
Yeah.
But the point is like, I gave up all that equity because business wasn't going right. And I had to get more money to keep things going and to pivot. You know, we went from literally flying drones around, taking pictures of cell phone towers and turning those things into 3D models to give to these engineers, which, dude, I had no background in this stuff. But my brother was like, hey, this is a good market. Don't open up a digital marketing agency, you know, for your next business. Turns out I busted my butt, you know, within a few months. I was figuring it out, flying drones, learning the software, talking to top experts. You know, even flew out to California for like a 3D, I forgot what it's called, but it's basically the latest and greatest in 3D technology, you know, expo out there at Anaheim at their expo.
So just 1 second real fast. How long ago was this? How many years ago was this time period for you?
That business was, I want to say off the top of my head, probably 5-6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer at this point, maybe 7. Yeah. Going back to that. Man,
so you're just like piecing things together, like hustling, basically. You were in hustle mode still, right? At this point.
Yeah, man. Learning all kinds of new technologies, you know, flying the drones, learning this 3D modeling software where I had to like you take the pictures and they stitch them together, then had to take that to AutoCAD and scale it a certain way. And like we basically learned how to get these. Here's the crazy part. We learned from just Phantom 4 Pro while everybody else was trying to use LiDAR and stuff to do this, you know, these mappings, right? Learn how to just by being smarter than not even smarter, but using your brain like MacGyver style, you know, growing up poor and stuff. My dad was just always like, figure it out, figure out how to, you know, place bets online or play poker online or whatever, right? He saw the internet as this amazing thing, which he was right. But he didn't know how to do anything because he's an old fart, you know what I'm saying? At that time. And, you know, so I would be the guy who had to do everything, you know? And so what I hated when I was a kid ends up being the thing that makes me very competitive because what I lack in resources, I'm able to creatively solve problems like this, right? And so I took these pictures from a Phantom 4 Pro, which the GPS is garbage, right? It's like, don't even worry about those measurements. And I was able to just do simple stuff like laying sticks on the ground, like looking at the plans for like, you know, for example, like the antennas on the towers, like what's the size these should be, or the beams that are on the tower. And once you understand that stuff, well, then you just got to go into, once you have the scale, because it's, you know, it's to scale. It's just, you just don't know what the proper measurements and scale are. But in the 3D software, so you take that into like AutoCAD, and then you just scale it in there to the known measurements you have. And now all of a sudden you're able to get within 1/100th of an inch, right? Which was what we set out to do, because when you go to these towers, they normally have to send somebody up these towers, and it requires a team, which is going to cost you $3,000 to $5,000 a day, probably a lot more nowadays. And so if you can send one guy out and do 10 of these towers and you're charging, you know, even just a couple of grand, well, now you can do it cheaper, you can do it more affordable, and sounds great on paper, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the problem with that business?
Nobody trusted it. Nobody trusted it. And probably I was like just kind of like recovering from my last business, you know, for a few years, you know, and maybe I just didn't have confidence.
You had entrepreneurial trauma. Yeah. That's a thing. For sure.
Yeah, exactly. But like Rocky, you know, talking to his son, you just got to get back up. If you just sit down, you know, the world will keep beating you down and you're going to stay down the rest of your life. And so, you know, so we got back up, and we ended up doing because we had a hard time selling it. There's only one client who hired us, you know, paid us 15 grand. And we just really couldn't get enough work fast enough is what I should say.
Yeah. So the sales cycle was long. Yeah. And you guys were doing something new and like bleeding edge, it sounds like. So people are like, what the heck? Yeah.
Every wrong thing to do for a business when you haven't really, like, I tell people all the time, like, that come to me for business advice who are brand new, like, dude, do something that's tried and tested and proven and true, and find somebody who's willing to mentor you in that field and just do what they do, and just make something unique about how you're positioning, your offering, right? How you're going to do it, and make it, please don't make it about the price, because you're not going to be able to do that in 99% of the cases. But
Right.
everybody wants to, especially the visionary types, right? They have some big, huge, grand idea how they're going to revolutionize the world. It's like, bro, revolutionize your backyard,
Dude, for sure. And like, this is what I found, that it's a mistake that I see most entrepreneurs for sure make. And then a lot of, legit entrepreneurs fall into this too, which is just that if you think it's a very naive and or egotistical thing to come into business and think, hey, no one else has figured this out yet out there, and I'm going to be the special unicorn to do it. Like, what? In business, almost everything has been figured out. I'm sorry, but you're not Elon Musk. If you were, you would just be Elon Musk already. Okay. Like, I'm sorry, and so it's like, to me, unless you are Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, or pick your person, it doesn't really matter. But those people are unicorns. Steve Jobs was a unicorn. I'm sorry, because it's either naivety or ego, in my opinion. And what happens is people go out there and they're like, you know what? Someone's already doing this way. I'm going to do it my way. And people are going to see how special I am. In business, that is a death sentence typically, right? Because the market doesn't give a shit. Gary Vee kind of made this famous, like, the market wants what the market wants. You cannot change it. I mean, unless you have just so much influence, which, again, you don't. If you're listening to this, you don't, right? I'm serious. It's very humbling. It's just like, it's the best teacher. It's like business and surfing, right? You go into, oh, sorry, my camera just froze, but you go into surf, right? Let me see is that better? There it is. You go to surf, and I don't care who you are or how big or small the waves are, you're going to get humbled. Like, if you do it more than a handful of times, right? And it's like being mad at nature. It's like, you're going to get mad at something that naturally exists, that's so powerful it can kill you. And your ego is still trying to say, no, I'm special, I'm better, right? I can outswim a current. Right? It's just, dude. So when you're saying that, I'm just like laughing inside, because I'm like, I've been there myself a ton of times. At some point I realized this, and I just see people doing it all day, every day, where they're like, no, bro, I'm going to be at the very beginning of the bell curve. No one knows about this, so it's all going to be mine. That's the attitude, right? And everybody who's been through that laughs at it, because at one point we've all thought it, I think, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's really, I mean, just summed up, and this pretty much sums up, regardless of what you believe in, and what your background is or your faith in is, what you believe of God or not, nobody can deny you have friction versus flow in life, right? And
Yeah.
I would argue that nearly all of us, for most of our life, if not all of our life, some of us, we're always pushing against the current, and we can't just go with the flow. And a lot of that, heck, I would say all of it is tied to our egos.
Yes.
That's the most dangerous thing on this planet, or one of the most, if none the least, is our egos. That's what gets us in trouble, versus just, being humble and meek. And I don't mean like a wuss, because if you're a wuss, you're not humble or meek. You're just a wuss because you don't have the power to do anything about something to begin with. What
Right.
I'm talking about is legitimately, for example, like for about to get into that Elon Musk and Zuckerberg fight, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a fight in life, right? Like, dude, I don't care how well the technique you have, how strong you are, for your size, dude. If you're 4 foot nothing, and dudes, and this is ridiculous, but you're fighting a 20 foot, 30 foot robot, Like, bro, like physically, you might have some other power somewhere we don't know about, but physically, you're not going to win that battle ever. And that's what it's like trying to fight nature.
Yep.
And that's what it's like trying to fight the laws of like the physics of the universe. Dude, I believe there's moral laws out there, right? Like there's, it's like anything. Like if you break a law in life, there's gonna be negative consequences for that. Eventually, somebody call that karma, right? It might not happen right away, but it eventually was going to come back. And so, how this ties into business here, right? And especially systems and processes, which that's all about, is creating flow. And that's why it's like you hire somebody to do this exactly the way I teach you to. I don't care what you think until you've proven me that you understand the system. Yes. Then I want to hear your opinion about how we can make it better. Until then, day one noob, just shut the heck up or you're out the freaking door. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, if you want to eat and you want, and I definitely want to eat, it kind of has to be like that. For especially like the smaller you are, the more it has to be like that, I found. Right. And so another common mistake I see is people will try to mimic businesses that have near infinite resources compared to the amount of resources they have. And so they go, oh, that company's doing that, so I'm going to mimic them. And that is by far one of the biggest mistakes I've ever seen. I did that in my first business and it was a disaster. Like we were literally poor. I mean, it was just like, we got lucky that it wasn't worse than it ended up being, right? Like, but if we lost one client, we were in the red. We worked for 6 months, be slightly in the green, doing it this way. And then we'd lose one client, we'd be in the red, and that would take up all the profit from the previous 6 months worth of work, And so to your point about flow and friction, we were fighting an uphill battle, right, the whole way. And so we were lucky we didn't get squished early, because if that had happened earlier, then we wouldn't have had the resources to survive, right? Because we're not a big brand. We're not a giant business. And so the smaller that you are, the more reliable your systems have to be, in my experience, so that you can survive. The amount of variance that naturally happens in business. And because if the variance is too great one direction or the other, things start to break. And if you have no resources to cover you, or very little resources to cover you when things break, that means that your business is defunct, cash flow poor, you're in debt, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's burnout, it could be time too, right? So yeah, dude, I completely get it. It's a thing for sure. It's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because I want to share more of this stuff with people,
Absolutely. And, you make a very good point there. And I want to make sure people hear what you just said there about, it wasn't just the downs. You mentioned first the ups. Yep. See, everybody's worried about the down, but that growth spike, every business that I've ever closed, that is what caused it. Because
growing too fast is what you're describing, right? Sorry.
Yeah, growing too fast. Exactly. Too much stress, too much pressure. Because I've never closed a business ever, or walked away from one, sold it, had it acquired, whatever, had a couple of minor ones, I'm saying, some lows, lower 6-figure payments, nothing crazy amount, not Robb's level here yet, but but the point I'm trying to make here is it was always all the stuff from just pushing myself too fast and and not even myself. If it was just myself, it'd be no problem. I got push myself all the time, but it's when you're working with other people and you start having employees and, you start having, team leaders and all this stuff. Oh my gosh, man. Dude, what a bunch of whiny freaking babies. Oh my gosh, we're making too much money. We got to work. I'm joking, because they have absolutely every right to actually be upset there, because we did a poor job, of making sure that we have the systems and processes and things in place in order to handle the growth. The growth is fine if you expect it and you know how to manage it properly. and that you've been able to, set that precedence and expectations with your people ultimately, knowing
Yeah.
what they're getting into. But when you just start, pushing and pushing and, it's just month after month of growth and growth and growth, and you just never let off the gas. Well, it's just like, taking like a premium vehicle or vehicle that takes premium gas, man. Imagine you're driving around a Ferrari, you're putting 87 in it. You don't got the right fuel. You don't got enough fuel, and you don't got the right people who understand how to take care of that performance vehicle in your organization.
Right.
And so it's like, it's like if you're on a racetrack, dude, you need the pit crew, not just the driver of that vehicle.
Yep. Yeah.
And a good CEO, they're the driver of that vehicle most of the time, right? And there could be some CEOs who aren't, technically, but generally speaking, your CEO of the business, your founder, he's driving that vehicle at least for a while.
Yep.
And it's up to you to make sure that you're in a vehicle that you can handle, the speeds at which it goes, and a race that you can handle against competitors that are at your level. And you have the pit crew who can take care of you, right? And you have the right finances and money between races so that you don't just have one promotion one month and then all of a sudden, boom, you're going out of business, a few months later because now you have a terrible reputation and now you can't service your old clients and now you can't hire people fast enough and now your good people quit because they're tired of all the BS new people who weren't properly vetted and qualified to work for your business. Or maybe it's you're taking on clients who completely destroy the culture of your business because they're just money grubbing. And as soon as, especially in the agency world, right? Like
Yep.
we had a high retention rate of 98 to 99% plus month over month, which is, rare in the world. But even with that, we were still killing ourselves and killing our people. I felt like it was like Moses Pharaoh, in Egypt, like, like making work hard on the Hebrews, man. Like I legitimately felt that like almost all of our people, except for a few, we're in the Philippines and they're working these crazy late hours. And I know they weren't getting, enough sleep between work and
Yep.
that they're working extra hours that, because they're trying to help the company out and they really did love what we were doing and they were loyal to the company. But ultimately those things, and I'm talking about this in detail.
Yeah.
Because that's why I recently closed down a very profitable business. Not because it wasn't making money, but because I couldn't stand to look at myself in the mirror for what I built.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that goes back to like, we've sort of touched on it, but like self-awareness is huge in this space, right? Like if you're in charge of your own stuff, you have to be really careful. Like for example, a lot of people, they'll overwork themselves, like they'll become addicted to working almost, right? And the reason why that can be a bad thing is because if you don't have the self-awareness to see where the ship is headed, so to speak, then you can get this problem pregnant, which, makes for a pretty good problem to have, of course. Like there's worse problems to have in the world, I think, but it's still a problem, which is, your happiness factor is not going up as the company grows, right? And so when people from afar look at something like that, they might say, hey, business is all about making money, but we have to look at ourselves. Like if we're not enjoying it, if we don't feel like we're doing some good in the world, like it's really hard to stay motivated, like super hard to show up every day and be like, yeah, I still want to do this. I want to grow it, or even just sustaining it. It can be a very, very difficult thing to try and go, well, I built this. I don't want to let people down. Right. But I'm also not super happy and not thrilled with the direction that this thing's going. That's like so to me, I think it goes back to spending a lot of time like in regular intervals, because we're not a tree, right? Humans progress and our wants and needs get change over time. Excuse me. Our wants and needs change over time. For me, a big wake up call was like having my kids. It's like the biggest shift of priorities, maybe any human can have. So that was kind of a natural thing that happened in my life. But even before that, I was naive to the fact that I thought that just having the money, having the business, having it be successful would like bring me omnipotent happiness somehow. I don't know why people say that or think that, but that's kind of like the naive part of what I thought. So I spend time on it. I intentionally spend time like tearing apart what I want to have in my life, both internally and externally. And I'm getting better at it. I'm investing more time and resources into that because I think it's like deathly important for guys like you and I, for any entrepreneur, period. It's like super important, you know? Cool, man. So tell me so fast forward to maybe like now or more recent, what are you working on now, and how have like systems, like I'm interested to hear about some of the cool stuff you're working on now, and then maybe you can just head the direction of tying in, how systems have improved your happiness factor or improved the business, or both.
Absolutely. So what I'm doing right now is pretty much the opposite of what I ever imagined myself doing. Number one, that's like getting in front of people, being on camera, right? And talking about deeply personal things, specifically, with, entrepreneurs. And so just so you know, my definition of entrepreneur isn't necessarily just somebody who owns their own business. Most people who own their own business just really own a job. It's somebody who's really building something that's bigger than themselves, meaning like, it's kind of simple, right? You're building something bigger than yourself, more than just to feed your friends and family. Because how much money does it take to really just take care of your family? Like it's really not all that much in the grand scheme of things. I mean, dude, you go make $5-10 million bucks, you can knock that out in a few years of just hard work. You really can, right? Somebody really wants to, knock it out and invest every dollar. It wouldn't take very long to just do that and then coast the rest of your life.
Yep.
And if that was the case, a lot of us entrepreneurs, that's what we would do if we weren't true entrepreneurs. But we want to change the world in somehow or fashion. Just the older we get, the more we realize, that there's a long timeline to this, to do it properly without killing ourselves in the process. And so that's really, with the podcast show, The Fiery Forge is what I finally decided on. And it's about going through that furnace, just like gold goes through, the dross comes out and you have the polished gold on the side, and then that gold gets formed into whatever you want it to be. And that's just kind of how the life of an entrepreneur is, right? Because you got to be absolutely insane to go through it. And then not just in the beginning, right? You get burned, you realize, oh crap, this would but we're crazy. We keep going through it knowing that it hurts and it's painful and there's easier ways, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really about how entrepreneurs like us were able to find balance, and to also tell people and warn them, and that, hey, like this is what it's really like. And so if you're looking up to us, like deciding that you want to get into this, and you're seeing these, like the gurus, right, flashing all their stuff, this is really what you're, in for, and you can get that life with the beach house on the mansion and the Lambos and all that. But a lot of us, I find, by the time you get to the point where you actually have the ability to start doing those things, right? Whether you're going to do it hood-rich or legitimately, that's a different story. But regardless, a lot of the dudes that actually get to that point, I would say it's a large percentage, you'll never find, going out doing that stuff, because that they know it doesn't make you happy, because you can only buy so many cars, go to so many houses, go on so many vacations, until you realize you're just running away from your life and you're covering it up with all this other crap, because really you're just a deeply broken, damaged human being, which is why you're a freaking entrepreneur to begin with, because you're trying to prove yourself to the world. And that's how you got in this place to begin with. At least that's what I've seen. And you might be the exception to the rule, but
no, dude, it's just,
right?
I think we're all like that. First of all humans are broken. I believe that. The entrepreneurship bug is a matter of variance, in my opinion, right? Like I have all those things. It's just a matter of degree and variance, right? Like, so my mistakes, my path was not the material path, because I care very little about that, but I did it in different ways. I did the same thing just in different ways, right? So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's a beautiful thing to talk about, because if you look at the mental health, like dude, especially online entrepreneurs, our mental health is on the same level as like combat veterans, in my opinion. It may be worse. I don't know. Cause like we don't have stats on this stuff. It's just a sentiment, a general sentiment. And I observe how many people are like, I've waited 10, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to share this, but under the surface, I've been miserable. Like I've wanted to end it several times, delete myself, whatever the case may be. Right. Or, everybody thinks that my relationship with my spouse is all roses, but ... Or everybody thinks I have it all and I'm a single dude who's a millionaire, internet millionaire, but ... Right. And you see them all. I mean, you probably saw some today, right? Like it. And so for you, I just want to, applaud you, I guess, for number one, having the balls to share some of this stuff yourself, but number two, creating a forum for people to maybe talk about it or at least feel like they're not weirdos for feeling the same way. Right. Because that we are weirdos, right? Like what you described, you know what I mean? Like who does that? Who runs through a brick wall and goes, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?" Yeah, I enjoy having people tell me no 78,000 times a day and then getting kicked in the groin and going, "Yeah, that was fun. I'm going to get up tomorrow and do the same thing again." It's just like, we love pain. It's like we find a way to like, it's not even like being like a lot of people compare it to athletes, but you get physical highs from being an athlete. It feels good to be in good shape. It feels good to run fast. It feels good to lift weights if you're a guy. Yeah. And so, but dude, a lot of entrepreneurship, it just plain sucks. It really does. And so, once you get to a certain point and you understand the rules, the laws, how the game works, all that stuff, it does get easier, but it pretty much is like embracing the suck, And so so my biggest flaw with this whole journey that you've briefly described, but I never did the thing where I flex that way with the material objects and the cars and the girls and like whatever, which a lot of 20-something-year-old males do. But my whole thing was like sovereignty. I was like, I want complete freedom to do whatever the heck I want. And when I did that, it was like such an unhealthy balance that I almost like pretended like the old me didn't exist. And that's a really dark place to be. Right. So I had to figure out how to be like, well, why did I feel like I was like locked up in chains to begin with until I was like 30, 31, 32. Right. And in the past, like I would say 2 years, I've been working really hard on this, but I came to find that I never thanked that version of me for getting me all the way to here, first of all. And then having that version of myself like be appreciated, like thank that person that I used to be, right? Because we're all like this is the thing is humans get stuck, and it's the ego, I think, but we get stuck like we're not a tree. So it's like people are like, "Oh, what do you mean that like I'm a different person?" I'm like, "Well, you were a baby once. Are you still a baby?" They're like, "No, of course not." It's like, well, why would you think that 10 years ago you're still the same person? Just because you're an adult doesn't mean that you're still 30, And so it's almost like going back through like a hard drive file, like in a timeline format, and being like, oh, and, memories are usually what trigger this, right? Go back and see memory. And for me, I blacked out all of the bad shit that like I would see a picture of a memory and be like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Get it out of my face. Like I didn't want to go back at all, and be like, what was I feeling at that time? What was I doing? Like, and I just felt like it was just like, it's like, that was trash. And now I'm better, and that's fucked up, dude. Like that's depressing, really. So I just kept stuffing it down and stuffing it down and stuffing it down. Well, that comes to a head every once in a while. And, it's happening for me. I didn't have a midlife crisis where I like go buy a red sports car. That was my midlife crisis. Was just being like, I'm being a giant dick to myself, basically, and as self-loathing and pathetic as that sounds, it felt way worse. Like the feeling inside and this is due to a lot of stuff, which we don't have time to get into today, but I'm talking about things like depression, anxiety, PTSD, you name it. It's just, and I grew up a lot like you. I was, I was kind of like in survival mode from a very young age. I got my first job when I was like, I think 10 or 12 or something, and was mowing lawns, had a little lawn route and feeding people's dogs while they're on vacation. So I was just like hustling, selling candy bars to make the baseball team or to pay for the baseball team, all that kind of stuff. And that just continued on. I was working like 3 jobs through college. And so I was just like hand to mouth. And I was actually kind of homeless there for a while too. But it wasn't like on the street. It was like, couch surfing, sleeping in my car. Then I had to sell a car so I could buy a truck. And like, it was just like, as bad as
like no cars needed anymore.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So
I'm going to sell my car to start a business.
Yeah. It's funny because people are always like, oh, you Gen Xers? Did you really drink from a water hose? I'm like, yeah, a lot. Like, really did that. Yes. And they're like, was there no water inside? I'm like, my parents were working or just not home. And, it just, and that's not to, I'm not bashing my parents or anything, but that was just a reality for a lot of us, we're kind of like a latchkey kid sort of thing. And we'd eat at our friend's house if there was food, and likewise at our house if we had food, and they just all pile in sometimes. And what's that?
That's part of the American dream, yeah. Parents go to work, then they come home at night and maybe have dinner together. And if they did, usually it was, sitting in front of the TV, and having like a microwave. I remember, I forgot they're called. They had like the penguins on them or whatever, little animals and stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so what ends up happening over time though is, and I think this is especially true for entrepreneurs, but just people in general speaking now, is you build this external and internal persona, and you end up spending as your ego gets more hardened, I would say, which is a great analogy for your fiery forge analogy, is your external persona gets much more hardened, right? So our neural pathways get set in stone further and further as we get older. That's why it's hard for older people to change. If you think about like your grumpy grandpa, right, who's sitting in the corner, he's like, damn kids, get off my lawn. It's like, there's a reason that person's got 90 years worth of neural pathways set, and his external and internal persona are so hardened that they just don't have the energy to change it anymore. Well, you and I are only halfway done with our lives or thereabouts, right? So to me, I'm like, I got half the game left to play. I better smarten up and address both of these things, is the way that I chose, or I'm choosing to look at it. And so I think that you're touching on some of those same things, man. And I just think it's so important for people to hear, and maybe for some people to come on and tell their story to you. That's huge, dude. So I'm a fan already. I didn't know that's what it was about. That's cool.
Guess tomorrow. You don't even know what my show's about. What the heck? We're busy guys. We say a paragraph. I mean, I just literally decided last Friday to do this thing, and I'm like, I'm going to push this thing out. I'm going to get 100 episodes within the next 90 days, because I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been a podcast host. Like, I understand a lot of the things behind it, obviously, from business and especially digital marketing. You learn how to do everything along the way, or at least I did. But, I've been pushing it off for so long. And right now I'm in the phase where I've just been like constructing my life. And once again, going back into systems and processes. For me, I originally learned systems and processes in business, which is great. I could tell you all kinds of stuff I've learned. I could tell you some stuff that Robb learned that, it really taught me, and I made it like 10 times better. But that's besides the point here, My grandpa over is old school, high level snapshot. Look what I got under the hood. Speaking about performance vehicles, just playing. But no, Robb, like, especially with stuff that I learned from you, man, just simplicity is key. And I made those mistakes and overcomplicating, doing too much, make it like running too many different types of ads and offers and, stuff like that. And it bit me in the butt, made it infinitely more complex rather than just listen to you. But the point here is these business systems, which are great, let's again, check out Robb's stuff. You want to learn all about that, you can just look him up on Google. He's got like 10,000 pages out there and 100 million fans by now. Shoot, so I think he pretty much high level owes himself to Robb for blowing him up at the beginning. But, you and Sean, man, you guys did make a good team though. Still do, right? But the point here, once again, going back here, sorry, ADHD brain went squirrel on us. I've learned how to take a lot of stuff I've learned in business and apply that to my own personal life in different frameworks, like, Traction by Gino Wickman, the book that talks about the entrepreneur operating system, Profit First, Mike Michalowicz, heck, even some of Grant Cardone's stuff, we'll still throw him a bone, even though, there's a lot to be said about that nowadays versus, 10 years ago.
Yep.
The point is you learn all this different stuff in different areas of your life. And as you get older, you realize there's really not much of a difference between the faith you have in life, your physical and mental health, right? Yeah. Between, which I call fitness, your finances, whether that's business, personal, and ultimately family, right? And whether you consider, your close family, like, maybe you have a wife and kids, or maybe it's just your, brothers, sisters, parents, whatnot. But you realize, we're all family, we're all connected. And there's different levels and layers of family. And I think the closer the layer, you got to take care and prioritize those above the other layers. But you have these like 4 core areas of life, right, that we're talking about here. And in all those, areas, well, those need systems too, in order to run properly, especially for, people who are living an entrepreneurial life, right? Because you have more demands on you, more requirements that most people don't have. And so when you're trying to change the world, well, you can't do that without amazing systems and processes. And a big part of those systems and processes, right, is making sure that you have the right people involved with those too. And a lot of times you want to limit as much people as possible that are dealing with those systems and processes, because that's going to affect your capacity in various ways, especially to scale and grow something, right? And so that's ultimately what I'm working on right now, behind the scenes of the podcast. And that's kind of how this podcast idea came about, because I'm working on the system, and my goal is to really, it's not about money. It's about sharing with people, just like, you have like departments in a company. Well, instead of department, instead of looking at, hey, what's my 30-year or 10-year goal for business, right? Which a lot of people, get into, which is great. Look, okay, where do I want my life to be, on my deathbed? What do I want to be remembered by? And then from there, where do I see my life in 20 years or 10 years? Okay, cool. Now, what needs to happen in 3 years? What needs to happen in 1 year? What needs to happen this quarter? What kind of stuff should I be tracking weekly right now? What habits do I need to be keeping daily in each of these 4 areas of life, foundations or pillars, in order to remain balanced? So then that way I'm not making all this money, and all this money is toppling over and knocking out all these other things I'm trying to build, because I made so much money and now my health wasn't in shape. Like maybe you're like me, I got up to like 350 pounds. I was drinking, I was taking drugs, like, all kind. And when I say drugs, like, that's, you can get very deep into that. But what I mean by that is I was abusing that, whether that was, marijuana, whether it was alcohol, whether it was food, which is like the biggest drug of all, but that we could spend there for hours. I could spend not even hours, days talking about that. But the point is, anything that we put inside of ourselves or view outside, we're doing things with our senses. If we don't balance those things out, just if you eat too much kale or spinach every single day and you don't prepare it the right way, you can get very sick from some of the things that are inside of there. And so anything in life can be bad for you. It's just very easy to look at other people's things and just put a label on something versus, hey, am I doing this thing right? And whether that's making money, whether that's spending time with family, whether that's the food you're eating or, the drugs that you're taking, only you can ask yourself, hey, is this thing balancing my life out? Because my dopamine level is low right here, and here's a natural or like the best way for me to get that equal out? Or am I overdoing this because I'm trying to hide from my problems, which is what we do in all of these areas. We pick an area to excel in because that's easier for us or makes us feel better or whatever it provides. And money's one hell of a drug, it really is.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that balance, man. And the only way to do that is having proper systems in place. And you don't know what systems in place if you don't know where you're going in life and what your goals are in life.
Right. So, I think, the way that I prefer to think about it is, when people say the word balance, a lot of entrepreneurs scoff and they say, no, F that, balance is unnecessary. And I think there's periods where you can be severely imbalanced in just about anything. Like, think about if you didn't eat food for a whole week, would you survive? The answer is yes. But your system would be behaving much drastically different than it does if you're eating every day, right? So that system, though, cannot survive. Yeah. So that's like with anything. If the system is imbalanced for too long, then things start to break. So that can be with your mind, with your body, your metabolism, like whatever it might be. And that's how it is with almost everything, right? And so when you think about when people say we need balance, it doesn't mean like, I need to be doing the same thing every day and be super rigid, or, it just means you have to be super disciplined and boring. No, that's not what that means. It means that you need to be, it's more like a computer or an operating system. It's like, you can't expect, like, here's an example. Your brain works a lot like a hard drive, right? Because your brain is basically a computer. So if you continue to add more files to computer and you never hit the delete file from the trash bucket, eventually this whole operating system will run super slow first, right? And then it'll hit some sort of point where it's like, I can't work at all, right? And so if you think about systems from that perspective, with respect to just about everything, short periods are fine. You and I hustled our butts off when we were much younger. And now we're going through a phase where it's like, well, if that was the only thing, then the people who worked all the time would be the richest. And that's just not how it works, right? If it was just about running as fast as you can, then the top, fitness was just about that. Then all the top sprinters in the world would be the only fit people on earth. But that's not how it works, right? It's like, so when you say that, like, systems and processes, I think about everything. It's like, dude, plants are a system. There's photosynthesis that happens, in a plant, which is amazing, right? That's a system. Our conscious is split, right? We have a frontal, we have a consciousness and a subconscious, basically, and that's a system. A lot of the things that we do, like you brought up, alcohol, drugs, food, like whatever addictions that we have, it's like, it can be for anything that people get addicted to. Usually it's tied to some sort of function from your subconscious, right? And so when your brain is storing all of these experiences and trauma and like all this stuff, it's trying to protect you, right? So your subconscious is asking you to do things that trains bad habits sometimes, but it's a protection mechanism because it feels like it's getting what it needs somehow. And it's trying to protect you from all the bad stuff that's ever happened to you. And so when I figured this out, I just like in the last month, I just had this big aha moment about it. I'm like, wow, got to be careful what you put in there. Got to make sure to take out the trash, because your brain and your consciousness and even your subconscious, the stuff that involuntarily pumps your blood, has you breathe while you sleep, like all that good stuff. That stuff is a system, and we consciously have the power to determine what those inputs are, right? So I'm not saying that you need to make a goal to be a perfect angel. We're human, but just the awareness that more things are a system will get you that repeatable positive outcome or result that you are looking for in just about anything in life. That's why I'm so stoked to, talk about systems with people, because it could be anything to me. It could be health, nutrition, mental health, like whatever the case may be. But But yeah, man, I think that you're onto it. And this is a topic I could talk about for weeks. I mean, it just, so anyways, I guess to stay pretty close to, closer to home here, what, like, do you have a goal yet for the podcast, or are you just sort of leaving it open-ended at this point and just sort of seeing what kind of outcome happens?
It's funny we talk about systems and processes, because one thing about systems and processes, sometimes you can read all you want, you can have a mentor tell you everything, but sometimes, and for me, usually this is the case when I'm doing something that's just brand new to me.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like just
Going for it.
experience and just jumping in and doing it. And so I have courses I've taken, I have people I can call and hit up about this subject. And I've done that in the past. I've done it for the last 2 years and haven't done anything, except for I did one episode like a year and a half ago, but then decided not to launch because I, got busy with this and that. And so once again, last Friday, I'm just like, you know what? I'm going with it, and getting rid of that perfectionism. Because, dude, I'll tell you what, bro, and I'm not, screw it. I am going to say, because I've earned the right to. Bro,
go.
When it comes to like graphic design, websites, just like anything creative like that, dude. Like if I actually sit down and put the time in it myself, like, dude, I can do that stuff and do it amazing. But there's some key words there, right? Sit down, take the time. And me and you both know when you're starting a business, dude, it doesn't matter how awesome your thumbnails are, or how your logo is, or heck, even the name in this case of the podcast. I'm not even 100% convinced I'm going to keep that name, right? The one I really want, somebody already freaking snagged, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, well, I'll go with this one instead.
Right.
But the point is, none of that stuff really matters if you don't know what you're doing. Those are just supplemental things to add to your system and process, right? But you got to learn how to go from point A to get to point Z before you start building a master process for it. And this is why, like, so many people, they'll like never run a business before. They'll do like one funnel away challenge or something like that. And they're like, I'm going to build a business. I'm going to build a funnel. I'm going to do this. And they have they spent 6 months building this freaking funnel, and it doesn't work. And I was like, dude, I could have told you that from day one, because nothing I build ever works the first time. I got to go build it, figure out how it works. And then, what I do is I know where the end goal is mined. I know where to start, right? I figure those things out, and I get some information about the middle, but then I just get started with the beginning. And the very beginning of doing anything in business, even more, I hate to say this because people are going to take this wrong, even more than like really having a product or service to stand behind, is understanding the people that you're working with, right? Yeah. And what it looks like to deliver that product or service. And so with this podcast, that's why I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to get 100 episodes. I'm going to knock it out real quick. Like that's going to be, my tuition, if you will. And for the first 100 guests, I'm sorry, it's probably going to suck, but hey, I'll invite you afterwards when it is awesome. Because it is serious. Like this is something that, I'm passionate about and I enjoy. And and I'm doing it not because of the money, for the first time ever in my life. So I know this thing is going to be amazing and successful. Yeah. But in the meantime, you got to figure out all those little points. And so there's no better way to do that than to just do it all yourself.
Beginning. Yeah. And that's a skill, I would say. Yeah. The fact that you have zero hesitancy to go and do that is a skill, I think, that you built over time, which is amazing, dude. I wish you all the best. I know you're going to just go through the 100 episodes anyway and figure it out on the way. So I guess no luck is needed, but I'm really excited and happy to be on there tomorrow to drop whatever I can to help people. Do you want to let people know how they can find your podcast or your social channels, anything like that, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So just look for the Fiery Forge. You can view that on Apple, Spotify when it releases. I've done a few lives. I haven't actually launched like the podcast officially, but they maybe by the time this comes out, they'll be able to see it live. Otherwise, follow me on Facebook. Salvatore Stefano. You can look up Sal Stefano, SalStefano. I have a domain, salvatorestefano.com. I haven't done anything with it yet. It's just been sitting there for probably longer than I'd like to admit. And so that should be up here, relatively soon. And so guys, I don't have any special offer or, nothing like, like it's a cardinal sin for, somebody who's been in the marketing world not to have some kind of offer at the end of every show.
Yeah.
But the whole point of this is, and in this show, it's not about, it's not a pitch fest, like, hey, you should work with this person. Like a lot of these podcasts are. It has nothing to do with that. This is just purely like raw, unscripted. I don't even have question list I specifically answer. It's just a conversation that we're having about what's the real deep, dark crap that you've been through. And what have you done to try to find balance, the best you can at your life where you're at right now. And so if that's something that you're really seeking, I know a lot of us, we're a bunch of lonely dudes because nobody really understands what we're looking for. I invite you to check out the show. And then, if you're listening and this feels like you have like a story that you want to tell and you want to get your side of things out there, right? Feel free to hit me up and, let's get you on the show.
Love it, man. Awesome. We will drop some show notes, some links in the show notes as they become available. But, we're happy to do that. And then obviously we're friends on Facebook. I'll drop those links right away at a minimum for you, brother. So dude, keep crushing it. I love your fitness and health journey. I love hearing about that the most because I think like when I saw you in person last, I think you were close to what you described as maybe like your worst, your most depressing, all that. And I just am a fan of seeing you thriving, man. And it's so cool to see some of the photos and read some of the journey that you've had on your post on mostly for me on that, because the business stuff is great and everything. But like you said, we can always make more money. The person and the journey for the person is far more important. So I'm very, very grateful that I've been a small piece of that journey. And I look forward to continuing to like support you and, do whatever I can to be a positive force in that story, man. You've been killing it. You lost so much weight. You look so great. You're so photogenic. You're handsome, Italian, strapping young man. But you look happy, man. And that to me is the most important thing is you seem to be on the path that's making you more fulfilled, more happy, more satisfied. And I think that's kind of rare in our space, man. So again, I applaud you on all that. And I look forward to more of it in the future, brother.
Yeah, and if you didn't help me make so much freaking money the last couple of years, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that miserable to begin with.
Well, hey, you can. It's okay. You could just throw those dollar bills, that blue cheese my way, brother. It just if you got too much, I got kids to feed, so they're hungry. They eat a lot.
You'll start the Robb Bailey fund, poor old Robb Bailey over here.
I'll send you my GoFundMe link. Just kidding. All right, brother. Hey, man, be well. And I will jam with you. Look forward to jamming with you more tomorrow. Happy 4th of July, everybody. The Fiery Forge podcast with Salvatore Stefano, or Sal, if you're homies like we are. And thanks, man. Really appreciate you giving us time on an American holiday. Appreciate it a lot.